when there's moral failure or burnout, and again, I mentioned 70% of all pastors quit the ministry. I'm not talking about moving from church to church. I mean, they say, forget it, I'm out.
Yeah.
Burnout. It's like 42% of all pastors within the past year have experienced burnout. I just saw this, and I just happened to have this on my desk, that 1 out of 5 lead pastors report they contemplated self-harm or suicide in a 2024 study.
Hey, my name is Steve Hinton, and I serve as a pastor and author.
I'm your co-host, Matthias. I serve as a personal trainer and a volunteer at my local church. Join us now for another episode of The Man Identity.
Hey, Matthias, I want to ask you, there is an HBO program that came out, I don't know, maybe in the early 2000s called Band of Brothers. Did you ever see that?
I've never seen it, but I've
Have you
heard of it. I've heard of it, but I have no idea what it's about.
It's one of those deals. Actually, here in a couple of weeks, we're going to have an episode just over man movies, and that's just going to be a fun episode. But it was an HBO program that talked about the Easy Company in World War II, American paratroopers that dropped behind lines in Normandy, and how they pushed all the way into Germany during the war, and how they just had each other's back. Now, the phrase comes, and I talk about this in an interview from a William Shakespeare play called Henry V. It was actually about the King Henry, and how he rallied his troops, and he referred to them as a band of brothers. Now, here's the connection. Today, we've got so many guys in our world today here in the West who are just so stinking isolated. Maybe they've got an online community. They've got people that they work with, but the ability to really rub skin with other guys, to see them eyeball to eyeball and just doing life together is just fractured in ways that it's not been in just generations. Now, the truth is, Matthias, we need each other. Genesis talks about it's not good for a man to be alone, and the immediate application is he needs his bride. He needs Eve, but we are relational beings. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. God is Trinitarian. There's a relationship within God, and we are created with this need for relationship. So what we're going to be doing today is talking with a guy by the name of Dr. Rick Grover, who is the lead minister at a big church in Indianapolis called East 91st Street Christian Church. It's an older church. It's a large church, but it's a historical church, and he heads up a group called Covenant Connections. Now, a lot of the discussion is going to be geared toward ministers and pastors, but I mean, you know this, Matthias. We can extrapolate from that to just guys, no matter what they're doing, what line of vocation they are in, what you're doing, what guys in your church are doing, and just the fact that men need men. We need relationship, and things can go south really bad, really fast when we're on our own. It reminds me, there was this classic rock song. I think it was Simon and Garfunkel did it. 70s, called "I Am a Rock." And a lot of guys say, "I'm a rock. I'm an island. I'm really tough." And there are times we do need to be strong, and we need to encourage each other. Hang in there, hang tough. You can do this. But at the same time, that will only take you so far, and eventually you're going to implode or explode, one of the two. So this whole theme today is, what does it mean to be in a band of brothers? What does that look like? Why do I need it? How can I get into one? So I think what Rick has for us today is going to be pretty good. I think it's needed in our day and time.
Yep. Let's go ahead and roll it for the viewers.
Hey, Rick, we have spoken a lot on the Man Identity about finding a mentor. We've really encouraged guys, especially guys who did not grow up with a solid man in the house, godly man, to find mentors, whether that they go to a VFW, or the best option would be to go to a local church, get involved and find some men who have been down the road, further than they have, and just glean some wisdom, be with them, and just let them rub off on you. And I'm thinking about our discussion today. I'm thinking about how you and I came to know each other. And I'm thinking about a mentor by the name of Ahlgrim. Um, I probably searched for a mentor maybe more than you did, Rick, because you've got a much better relationship with your father. But you know Alan Ahlgrim better than I do. I've got a couple of stories, but we're talking about this man who passed away. What is it? 2 years ago now, Rick? Oh
Just
my goodness.
a year this past month.
You're right. You're right. Rick, tell us about this guy named Alan Ahlgrim and what God brought into the world through his through his life. What are some things that guys need to know about this man?
Yeah. Well, first off, Alan was a devoted follower of Jesus
Yeah.
and husband and father, grandfather, and pastor. He was a church planter, and then he went to Cincinnati, Ohio, and pastored a church there. From there, he went to Longmont, Colorado, and planted Rocky Mountain Christian Church.
Hmm.
And he was there. That was for the bulk of his ministry career. So 34 years, something like
Wow.
that, that he was a Rocky Mountain and retired from Rocky in 2012 and started a new ministry called Covenant Connections
Hmm.
and continued to do that all the way up till his death just a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you think of some times, Rick? Because I know that in Covenant Connections, we want to get to that. We want to unpack that. I know there was an initial, what do you say, a beta group, or the initial group. I know that you were in that initial group, but what were a couple things that you learned from his life?
Yeah.
Not so much, Rick. Here's a principle I'm teaching you, but just observing him and just walking with him.
Yeah. Well, I think a little bit of context to help answer that question is that I first met Alan when he was teaching a doctoral ministry course at Emmanuel Christian Seminary.
Okay.
So I was working on my doctorate, and he had a course on evangelism, church
Mm,
evangelism, and how do you help develop a culture of outreach for the church and not just a program that you
right.
do or programs in the church. So I was so moved by that class, so impacted as a young pastor. I was just getting started back then. That was in 1990, like 1993, probably something like that,
Okay.
1994, 3 or 4. So after that class was over, I just started following. You talk about a mentor. Sometimes with mentoring, it's not just um, mentors who are trying to find mentees, but
Hmm. Hmm.
it's us pursuing someone that we want to emulate, that we want to
Yeah.
learn from. So I just reached out to Alan and said, "Hey, I was so grateful for the class. I just want to follow you in ministry." And of course, this is before social media
Yeah.
and sermons online and all that kind of stuff. So it was more from a distance, but over the years, then I got connected with him in a deeper way, just through serving different capacities, different like CMF Christian Missionary Fellowship Board. I got involved with that. So through those opportunities to connect with Alan, I was moved by his energy,
Mm,
his optimism, his
yeah.
hope that he had. He was he just always had a smile on his face. He always had a, he just there
Yeah.
was, and I was really moved by that, especially because there was a season near the end of his ministry at Rocky Mountain where they went through, and you know the stories behind this, Steve. They went through some very, very challenging times. I mean, just some legal battles related to land use and tax laws
Mhm.
and so forth with land. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. I mean, this was became a
See, I
national,
didn't know that. I didn't know that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so much pressure. They had massive debt at that time at the church. They'd opened up a new campus, and we're trying to pay down debt on that. So it just was a very, very stressful time. But even in the midst of all that, Alan stayed strong. He
Mm.
never gave up the fight. He just and so I want to learn from that so how did he do that? How did he stay fresh in ministry and in marriage with his family through those challenging times? And so that's I just stayed as close to him as I could over the years, all the way leading up to 2012. So when he started Covenant Connections,
Mhm, mhm.
he actually, you talk about the initial group, he actually told me about the ministry that he was starting and invited me to be a part of that first group. But I had just started in my current role, the current ministry where I'm serving, and I said, Alan, I don't have the bandwidth to do that, so I
Okay.
passed. And then 3 years later, 2015, I was spiraling downward. Church was imploding. I had a heart
Mm.
attack. I reached out to Alan and I said, Alan, you know that conversation we had 3 years ago
Right.
where you invited me to be a part of your initial covenant group, pastor's covenant group? I said, are you still doing that? He said, yes, I'm getting ready to launch my second group and I have one opening.
Okay. Okay.
He
I
said, I've got
thought you
one
were in the
opening.
initial one. Okay.
Nope. He said, I've got one opening. Are you interested? And I said, yes, sign me up, please. And so I got into that group and it was transformative,
Mm.
life-changing. I've told people this many times that in different contexts, different settings, that God used Alan Ahlgrim and Covenant Connections to save my ministry because
Wow.
I was ready to
That's
throw in the
huge.
towel. I was
Yeah.
ready to give up and just I do anything but ministry. I'm just tired. I'm done. I was burned out. And Alan, and through the Covenant group, he taught me how to create healthy rhythms, how to
Hmm.
have vulnerability, how to process through emotions, how to have. He gave us some tools on just how to navigate through life and ministry in healthy ways. And now, as I came to the end of that 3-year commitment, that's when I reached out to you and others and said, "Hey, I want to pay this forward because this
Hey,
has
I
been
think
so
actually Alan
transformative."
reached out to me first. I think Alan says, "Hey,
Okay,
you need to call Rick Grover."
okay, good, good, because
We
that's
can
how we
arm
got
wrestle on the
connected. Was
logistics on that one.
that's fine because I wanted to pay it forward. I wanted to keep
Yeah.
things going, and secondly is that I knew I needed this as a part of my life, so it
Hmm.
wasn't just a 3-year program to get through and now I'm done. You don't graduate. It's I need to be in these soul care, vulnerable, soul enriching relationships with other men for the rest of my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's why I've just continued on ever since.
I knew your story, Rick, but I didn't know the extent of, or maybe the chronology when things were falling apart and when you connected with the covenant group and all that. That's interesting. Um, One little story comes to mind, and I think particularly this one, Rick, because you're right. It was just a little bit over a year ago that Alan passed away, but it was sudden. It was
Mhm.
sudden. Now, here's why I remember that. Well, here's the backstory. About a year prior to that, Alan and I were having a conversation, and apparently Alan thought that one of my decisions was a dumb decision, and he was very lovingly, but he was very forthright. He said, Steve, I would be embarrassed to have done what you did. And
Mm,
and I'll be honest, that kind of hurt me a little bit. And I had a choice. What am I going to do with it? Well, I said, okay, I may not have liked that, but I didn't bail on it. I didn't bail on him. I didn't bail on anything. But he was being honest with me. Now, here's the connection. About 5 days before he died, and I'll put this in the show notes. I wrote a blog post, which would have been early February of last year.
mhm.
And I talked about covenant connections and I talked about a band of brothers. And I want us to, Rick, I want us to talk about that phrase in a moment, band of brothers. And I talked about a World War II story. And in this blog post, I referenced a number of things and then I posted it. And then I shot Alan a text. And I said, "Hey, Alan, I was thinking about you. Here's this blog post on hanging tough, being like Barnabas, being like a band of brothers. I mentioned covenant connections, thought you might be interested." And here's what Alan did. Number one, he did not merely respond to my text, but he pulled the website up, he pulled the blog post up, and he made a comment on it. And then he texted me back and he sang praise about this is, hey, this is spot on. This is a good article. The point being, Rick, I was really able to know that Alan was not just blowing smoke. He wasn't, because he was honest. He was honest to say, "Hey, Steve, this is an area, buddy, you know, that you ought to
Mhm.
think about." But then he was able to say, "Steve, this is really good." And I think that's part of what we want to learn as men is being able to, press into mentors to get the encouragement, but also being willing to hang tough and hang in there when the coach doesn't say exactly what we want him to say.
Right. No, I agree with that. And Alan had a way with that, didn't he? I mean, he would be very direct with a smile on his face.
Yeah.
Of why would you do that? That, have you thought, do you need to step back and you think about that some more? And, it's just always so quick-witted. And so, yeah, Very
So
important.
Alan did pass away, and it was just a sudden thing. And Rick, I think I told you this, but I knew intuitively, and I remember sharing with a couple of guys just within days after that happening, that you were the right guy. And I know that other guys prayed about it on the board, and you prayed about it, and you were able to step into that role. You're in your present role at East 91st Street, East 91st Christian Church there in Indianapolis, which is just an amazing flagship church. But you're also doing this. But tell us about Covenant Connections. What is this now? Our obviously our podcast is not designed for pastors and ministers. We want to encourage young men. But I think if we can pivot for just a moment to talk about what is this, and why is this needed for ministers? Now, number two, to extrapolate it for all men. But number one, because I think a lot of people don't understand what ministry is like in America today. All kinds of assumptions. It's kind of like one of my best friends. If I ever talk to him on a Saturday, he's like, "Hey, Steve, have you downloaded that sermon yet?" that idea that we only work like 1 or 2 hours a week. But so Rick, tell us about Covenant Connections and why that was formed, why that is needed
Hmm.
for pastors, for ministers.
Yep. Well, the statistics are startling, shockingly disturbing that nationally, 70% of all pastors drop out of the ministry within 10 years of ordination.
Mm,
And then the 30% who finish, many of them, a very high percentage of the 30% indicate that they have not been finishing well. And
mm,
so when Alan started Covenant Connections, he was very, very good friends with Dr. John Walker, who at that time was the founder and director of Blessing Ranch Ministries, which was also out in Colorado. Now they're Tarpon Springs, Florida. And
right.
Charity Byers, his daughter, is now the executive director of that. She's a clinical psychologist, as is her father. So Alan and John Walker were good friends, and Alan was talking with John Walker when he was nearing retirement. Alan, nearing retirement from Rocky, and he said, "John, I want to start a ministry that is preventative, that helps
Mm,
pastors and church leaders stay healthy, so they don't have to come to Blessing Ranch, because Blessing Ranch is really a ministry geared towards critical care."
mhm,
It's a ministry geared towards, it doesn't mean that the pastors or church leaders have to be in a crisis, although a high percentage of leaders who go to Blessing Ranch are in the midst of some type of crisis, whether it's a
right.
burnout or something that's taking place in their life personally or with marriage or with ministry. So they go and they have these week-long intensives through professional Christian counseling and therapy. And Alan said, I want to work with pastors and church leaders so that they are learning how to get healthy and stay healthy, so they don't need that type of crisis care. So when Alan started Covenant Connections, he started as a ministry of soul care covenant groups for pastors and church leaders. He began
Mhm,
identifying some principles. In fact, he came up with 12 what he calls transcendent principles. I would say transferable
okay.
principles, that can help men and women, pastors or non-pastors, but primarily the ministry started with pastors and church leaders, of working through these 12 principles on how we can discover, develop, and grow healthy spiritual and emotional health in our lives. So these covenant groups are a method for that. The end goal is to see us move towards spiritual emotional health.
Mhm,
The method to reaching that goal is this model of these transformative, soul enriching covenant groups.
mhm,
So that's why Alan started, and that's what the Covenant Connections ministry is all about. And one thing, real quick, that I want to just mention, and you know this, Steve, that since Alan started this, he started basically with lead pastors, because
right.
that was the world, that was those were the waters in which he swam. So he was reaching out just relationally to pastors that he was already connected with and had a network of relationships with. But since then, that the ministry has grown to where there are women's groups, there are groups now for executive pastors, there are others that are taking these principles and applying them to their churches. And I'll give you
Mhm,
two examples of that. One is that even here at East 91st Street Christian Church, the church where I serve, that we have covenant groups for women now based on this model.
mm,
And so we have about 75, 100 women who are involved in covenant groups. They meet monthly. They go through the 4Ds, which is a tool that Alan developed of a way to get into conversation and way to get into kind of self-assessment, looking at what's going on in our souls, our hearts, our lives in the time that we're sharing with each other. So and other churches are doing that as well. Another example is Corinth Christian Church, which is outside of Atlanta. They have some covenant groups going as well. Second example of this is with business leaders. I met
Okay.
with a group of businessmen in Colorado. This was outside of Colorado Springs. I'm trying to remember the exact name of well, not little, was it near the Boulder area? So Boulder,
Okay.
Colorado, group of business leaders, CEOs. One's an artist, a successful artist there in Boulder, and these men meet together every week as a covenant group. And so they've gone through Alan's book. They practice the 4Ds. They do they're reading through other books as well. And so they have that weekly time of a touch point with each other, a check-in, and it's not just for the purpose like doing a Bible study, which of
Yeah.
course nothing wrong with Bible study, but the point is that we all need this. Yeah, whether it's through covenant connections, we're just a resource to help churches and individuals. But the point is that we all need this. We need these. We need to be in this type of community, this band of brothers, as you said, or band of sisters, because now they're also there are women's staff in churches that are getting into covenant groups. Well, there's another example is one of the guys that's in my current group. He's going to be launching a group for couples, so pastors and wives together in this. They'll still have retreats where the guys have their time and the ladies have their time, but so that we begin to see some multiplication occurring and reaching out into different venues, so to speak, of ways to help provide soul care for people in addition to pastors.
Okay, Rick, before we talk about soul care, the idea of band of brothers, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but that phrase actually comes from a Shakespeare play about Henry V. Actually, there's a couple of movies on Netflix, maybe. I like the old one, which was done in the 80s. And it's this big deal where the English are on the morning of this huge battle with the French, and they're just thinking we're going to get our tails kicked. They are totally outnumbered, but Henry V talks to them and he encourages them, and he talks about the fact that years from now there will be men in England who wish they had been here with us today. And he referred to them as a band of brothers. Now, it also became more famous in our culture today. Wow, I don't know, 2001 maybe, when HBO did a series called Band of Brothers, and the focus is on the Easy Company paratroopers that dropped into Normandy on D-Day, and the whole series follows these guys. And when you look, Rick, at soldiers, Marines who have been in combat together, I mean, they've got each other's back. They're experiencing death all around them, and it's easy to see how that band of brothers can form. Now, for us, especially in ministry, because we're so isolated, and so are so many young men. We're so isolated, but just because we're isolated doesn't mean there's not a battle. Well, the reality is there is a battle, and in Alan's book, he talks about that battle. But with covenant connections, what are some of the rhythms? What are some of the questions? What are some of the protocols, procedures? How does this work that you can take two guys who are living two different lives? They're not in the exact same trench together, but they are in a battle, and they feel so incredibly isolated. How can we minister to them or help them minister to each other, just like a soldier on Normandy?
Well, let me start by getting back to what you're talking about with young men, and then moving into the band of brothers, because I think you raised such an important point, Steve, that with young men, there is an epidemic of loneliness in our culture today. This is part of the reason why I believe that with Gen Z, that there are more young men coming back into church now than previous generations.
Mhm.
And you know, and as you've even talked about on your podcast of you know, what's the cause behind that? Why are we seeing that for the first time in really in American church history, where young men are outpacing young women
Yeah.
back into church? Well, I think a big part of it is because there is this innate God-given call that we have for a band of brothers to be in a band of brothers. And when we're separate, when we're isolated, we're lonely, um, there's just a misery with that, and we're not fully functioning. And I think more and more young men are becoming aware of that. And so when we see young men, when we see churches that are willing to embrace young men, to walk with them, to, you know, we um, just started, a couple of the guys in our church here started recently. It's a ministry where the men get together, and it's been a great outreach of men coming together once a week, rain or shine,
Mhm.
snow or sleet or sunshine, any, you know, every week. Doesn't matter what's going on, outdoors. They come together for exercise, for manly exercise, and then they gather around a fire pit for conversation and devotion of scripture. And young men are coming into that. Why? I think it's because there is such a hunger, both for the way that God wired us and shaped us and created us, where men are we're seeking something deeper, something with adventure, something with
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yeah.
we can rally together around. And then secondly is to find that in community, this band of brother idea. So all of that as a background to say, when we look at covenant connections or the whatever methodology is used, I'll speak of, to answer your question, I'll speak of what we use in
Mhm.
this as a method for us to try to tap into that and provide a resource for that connection, that vulnerable connection as a band of brothers. So here's the way that we operate. Here's the way that we work. Then is that we come together with a 3-year commitment,
Okay. It's
and
a
we
it it's a
say
it's a it's a commitment. It's a
a
commitment.
commitment. Yep.
Yeah.
And we sign a covenant. So there's a covenant. So covenant connections, and agreement that we make, a covenant that we sign to say that we're in this together for 3 years.
Mhm.
And we're committing to we call the 4-3-2-1 model. So it's 4 pastors, or it could be 4 men or 4 women, whatever profession it may be, but 4 individuals over 3 years, 2 retreats a year, 1 Zoom call a month, or in some cases, if they're local, they can meet together
Mhm.
monthly. Um, and then there's a facilitator for the group. And so we're committing to stay within that rhythm of 2 retreats a year, 1 in the spring, 1 in the fall, having a monthly Zoom call, and that we are going to have confidentiality. We're going to open up, and we are going to share with each other what's going on in our lives. And that's what leads to then with the 4 Ds, as Alan introduced that, of delight, drain, discovery, and determination. You've added one in of data, which I think is great. Okay, so what's the data going on in your life right now? So what we do is when we have our monthly Zoom call, then or again, it could be in person, but you know, right now the group I'm in, new group that just started. I've got there are 2 pastors in Colorado, one's in Oklahoma, one's in North Carolina. So
Mm.
so we meet on Zoom. When we meet together, then we check in,
Okay.
and we have a word that we use to describe how we're feeling at that exact moment. And the reason why we do that, and Alan taught me this, because I was never good at describing how I feel.
Yeah, and most guys aren't. Most guys
Yeah.
aren't.
Alan would say, "How do you feel?" I'm like, I don't know how I feel, and
Yeah.
so he helped me begin to explore that. The reason why that's important is because if I can't identify what's going on, how am I going to be able to process through it and improve? How can I
Mhm.
grow if I can't identify what I'm dealing with? So we say in our Zoom calls, our monthly Zoom calls, I'm uh, excited, I'm depressed, I'm lonely, I'm hurting,
Mhm.
I'm whatever the word is. And we say, I'm all in. So regardless of how I feel at the moment, I'm all
Yeah.
in right now in this moment, this conversation. I'm setting aside everything else that's going on. I'm all in. And then as a group, we respond by saying, blessings on you, the name of the
Mm.
person, blessings on you, Steve. And it sounds, when we first started doing this, I was like, oh, this is like some little club thing, a secret handshake, and you got to have your little motto or pledge thing that you're saying. But the more that we started doing this, and now it's been 4 different groups that I've 5 counting the one that Alan was leading me in, and I just see the value of that because it is there's something about rhythm. There's something about
Okay.
uh, practice with that. And then we go around and we start sharing our 4Ds. Okay, so if I'm going first and here are my delight, here's what I'm delighting in right now. Here are the good things that are happening. Here are the
Hmm.
drains, things that are not going well. Here are my discoveries. Here's some things I'm learning right now. And then determinations. Here are the
Mm.
things, okay, between now and the next time we talk, I'm determined to do this. I'm determined to have that hard conversation with this person that I'm in conflict with. I'm determined to um, get back into a better rhythm of prayer.
Mm.
And then you guys can check in when we come back to that and say, hey, how's it going with that? How did you do that with that? So then after we share, then we take time to unpack that. Now, what does that do? Talk about Band of Brothers real quick. What that does is it gives a shared experience,
Okay.
and where there's trust. Like I'm thinking of that series, the HBO series you talked about with Band of Brothers, that Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
which is it was. In fact, my youngest son said he's going back through it right now with his
It's a
wife. They're
good
watching
series.
it.
It's a good
They're watching
series.
it again right now. But when I think about that, it's that okay? They had shared experience of that common enemy. They had to trust each other, and they had each other's backs.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there was that created this bond, this band that they had, this Band of Brothers. So it's like that with a covenant group, is that okay, we have a common enemy, we have shared experiences, we have trust, high trust, because you got to be vulnerable with each other, because you can't,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're hiding, um, then you're never going to work through whatever it is you got to work through in life. If you're struggling in your marriage, if you're struggling with some coping mechanism that's unhealthy, if you whatever the issues may be, and then that we're vulnerable, so we with that trust, then we've got each other's backs. That's where that bond comes. So that Steve, you and I've known each other now for a long time, been in a group together, and I know that if you're going through something and you wind up on the roadside in Mexico somewhere, and you're like, man, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And you call me, we're a band of brothers, and I have a responsibility to do everything I can to help go get you,
And see,
and
I
vice
think that's
versa.
I think that's huge because I can almost guarantee, Rick, that there are a slew of guys out there, most guys, that if they were in a crisis moment, the number of guys that they can call and they know this guy is going to pick up, no matter what time of the hour, is probably pretty thin.
Hmm. That's right. I agree with that. Unfortunately, I mean, it's sad that that is the case, but that's the way it was for me. I think that I'm like a lot of guys who are a mile wide and inch deep.
Mm,
And as a pastor, boy, I can shake hands, I
yeah.
can work a room, smile, and oh, good to see you, John. Hey, how you doing, Sally? Yeah, hey, how are things with your mom? Good. And and people would never know that I'm hurting, or that I just lost my dad, or that I just had a bad fight with my wife before seeing people, or that I had 2 people at church that left the church. They were mad, they were angry, they yelled at me. I mean, and it's not woe is me and self-pity, but it's, there's a lot of pressure. This is the thing that I don't know that everyone understands about the role of being I'll just talk about a lead pastor. Steve, you and I share this. We have this in common. There is a pressure that you have to deliver week after week after week, not a regurgitated, I saw this sermon online,
Yeah.
but there is a pressure of bringing forth the word of God, a responsibility. Now there has to be a calling, because if it's not a calling, we're going to, we're going to check out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But then all these people that are counting on us, you show up on a Sunday morning and you've got, whether it's 100 people or 1,000 people or 20,000 people, the number doesn't matter, because it's the people that you know that you have responsibility to share with them, to bring God's word. And then you have the pressure and responsibility of staff, of others, with leaders, of volunteers, that you know that they're depending on you. So you have that pressure, but then secondly, all of the criticism. I mean, it is weekly of, you know, well, in your
Yeah.
sermon, you didn't say this right, or you did that, or why didn't you say this? I mean, every Sunday, there are people in between services that will come up to me and it's from the previous service and will say, well, there's that one there, you didn't bring up this point or this other scripture. And it's like, well, you can only say so much in 30 minutes. You can't, you know. So anyway, I'm not trying to moan and groan about it. I'm just trying to paint a picture that there's just a lot of pressure, and then when things don't go well, when
Yeah.
something happens, um, like, here, I mentioned earlier, things imploded. I mean, when I first started here, and things went south, it just blew up. I mean, we had worship wars, and we had to lay off staff. Well, once you start doing that, then, we lost, man, thousands of people just left the church. And then what are we gonna do? We got this huge debt, and all of that. And that's when I had my heart attack. And I was spiraling downward. So the band of brothers that, regardless of what happens, regardless of what you're going through, you got guys that are in your corner, and they got your back. So back to what you mentioned moments ago, that there are a lot of guys that just don't have that. And uh, what I referenced there of a mile wide and inch deep, if you're going through something, who do you have that you can pick up the phone and call, and they know, and that they're going to be there, and they're not going to judge you. They're not going to, now they'll challenge you,
Okay.
but they're going to say, man, I'm with you. Okay. I'm with you. Let's figure
Yeah.
this out. You're
I
not
like you.
alone.
I like you said that they're not going to judge you. One of the things that I've, Rick, is that when a guy's doing his work, that the rest of the group, that we stand with faces like flint. We're not thinking about me. We're not thinking about how we're responding. We're here to receive, honestly, which makes it more favorable when I'm in the hot seat, when I need to say, "Hey, this is what I'm going through." Um, I also like, you talked about the delight, because it's so easy. And I wonder if well, when I think about Alan's book, I think he had to wrestle with it some too. It's so easy to look at all the negatives, to look at all the pushback, to look at all the problems,
Mm-hmm.
and to be deliberate. And maybe that's why there's the good in the rhythms. You think about martial arts, that there are rhythms. A black belt is going to have rhythms that they work through.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing, okay, one of my rhythms is I'm going to have to find a way to be deliberately looking for things that I delight in, even though everything feels dark. What can I delight in?
Mm-hmm. That's right. I agree with that. I had an elder say to me one time, back when we were going through all of our loss here. An elder said to me, Rick, you got to pick your chin up off the floor.
Mm.
Because the rest of the staff, they're gonna follow your lead. If you're moaning and groaning, and I know I kind of went through a little rant there for a moment about that, but he said to me, you got to pick your chin up and trust that God is with you. Trust that God's got this. We're with you together, and that's such an important thing. If there are elders who watch or listen to this podcast, that, man, to have godly men serving as
Yeah.
elders
Yeah.
who also become a band of brothers for you.
Mhm.
The elders here at our church, when we're going through things, I actually tried to quit twice. I went to the elders to offer my resignation and said, look, things are falling apart. You can make me the bad guy. Okay. As long as I can get out of here, as long as I can leave, then I'm good with that. And they were like, Rick, we believe God called you here. If
Mm.
God's calling you somewhere else, we don't like that, but we're not going to get in the way of what God's calling. But if he's not calling you to something, then we are asking you to stay, and let's work through this together. We're with
Mm.
you. So they supported me. They supported Laura and me. They sent us to Blessing Ranch. So we went to Blessing Ranch. Remember that crisis? I
Yeah.
mentioned the crisis care counseling, and they said we're behind you in this. And with the Covenant Group, when Alan first approached me, actually the second time, 2015, the elders said, "Hey, whatever the cost for that, we're behind you, and we will make sure, even if it's not in the budget, we're going to personally make sure that we get you that funding to get into that group because we want you to be healthy, and we want you to stay healthy, and we want you to be here for the long haul."
Mm, mm. Okay, Rick, we spent the bulk of our time talking about pastors. What about a guy who is working on the line at Ford,
Hmm.
or he's a nurse at a hospital, or he's teaching fifth grade science, or whatever? You got a guy, and he knows, hey, I've got to have some brothers.
Hmm.
What can he do to move in a direction of? And I think it's a biblical principle. There are
Hmm.
verses all throughout Proverbs. You know, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. What are some things that a guy can do to start to move in this direction of developing a band of brothers?
Well, let me start by just telling a real quick story about my
Do it. Do
father-in-law.
it.
My father-in-law worked for IBM his entire career.
Okay.
He served in Korea, and when he got out, he started at IBM um, in Lexington, Kentucky. And he was in the church. He was a deacon, served faithfully, was a behind the scenes guy. He mowed the lawns of the widows in the neighborhood, just that kind of guy, give you the shirt off his back. Well, when he retired, one it was at least one morning every week, and I can't remember now, it's been too many years ago. At least one morning a week, he was always down at the local diner and for breakfast, and he had his guys.
Mm,
And they knew each other. They've known each other for years. And that was his kind of his retired group of guys that they were always together. Now, and that was all the way up till the time he died, which was
mm.
that was 14 years ago that he passed away. But I think about that with this band of brothers concept because I think about this. What was special about this group? Well, this group had remember the Band of Brothers
Yep.
and that HBO series. This group had shared experience. Most of them worked at IBM. There may have been one or two that didn't, but they all had shared experience. They had lives, they had stories. Stories are the kind of part of the fabric of society.
Yeah. Yeah.
They weave us together. They had shared stories, shared life experiences. Through that, they had common language. Um, there was just that uh, the connection that they had. From that, they also had a common enemy because they all were believers, and so they had at the core that they were encouraging one another. They would never say it was a covenant group or a soul care
Hmm.
group
Hmm.
or something like that,
Hmm.
but they had a common enemy. Um, and it wasn't each other. And so they had trust with each other, regardless of what was going on with each other. They knew they could open up and they could share with each other, and they had each other's backs. So that group was not a program that was set up by the church. Nothing wrong. I'm not being disparaging towards programs, but there has to be fundamentally something deeper than just going through a 10-week study. 10
Yeah.
week
Yeah.
studies
Oh,
are
definitely.
they can be
Yeah.
good. They can be good, but they're the 10-week studies are um,
It's a
simply
tool.
tools. Yeah. It's a tool that can help us get into conversation and get into a better rhythm. And that's another key part of this is that they had consistency. They had a rhythm. So to me, taking the principles, even of what Alan wrote about in his book, Rhythms for Thriving, Soul Strength, Rhythms for Thriving, is that these guys, my father-in-law and his comrades, they they were living these out, even though it didn't come through a set program in the church. And that's what I think is for those who are watching and listening who are, young men especially, but
Hmm.
those in the marketplace, whether it's business or education or whatever field it may be, maintenance. Um, my father-in-law, Laura, my wife would ask him when she was growing up, she'd say, "Dad, what do you do at IBM?" He said, "Parts." That was always his answer. Parts. Well, what does that mean? Well, he worked on an assembly line, typewriters back before computers. And that's what he did for 35 years, you know? And it's like, why? And I asked him when Laura and I first started dating, then we got married. I said, you know, why, how did you stay just day after day doing that? Did you ever get bored? And he's like, of course I got bored, but I wasn't, I was, you know, he said, I was doing this because I was supporting my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's not all about, you know, we got to go find ourselves and we got to, you know, he's from a different generation, and he was like, that is that we work because God calls us to work.
We're created to work.
We're created to work. We can find joy in it, whatever it may be. And I know it's supporting my family. But that band of brother idea, for those who are whatever line of work they're in, is finding a group. And hopefully your church, if you're connected into a church, hopefully your church leaders will help you. If you don't just have that, can help you get connected in to where there can be shared experiences, a common enemy, the trust and vulnerability leading to we've got each other's backs. And one final thing I'll mention with this, Steve, is that to me, I think going back to my father-in-law and his group, is that, you know, those 4 key principles, in order for that to happen, though, there has to be space and time commitment. It doesn't just happen. Space, they're dedicating, devoting time and space together. Where in time, there's consistency, and there has to be commitment to it. So if one of them would miss breakfast, it'd be like, hey, Bob, where were you?
Yeah,
we missed you. Okay, so these guys are calling me into that iron sharpens iron that you talked about. These guys are calling me into this commitment, and I'm going to honor these guys because I value our friendship. So I'm going to be there every Tuesday morning at 6:30, you know, whatever. So that's why I just think it's so important.
Rick, the word that comes to my mind in thinking about all this is intentionality. In other words, okay, I know that there are guys in my life, but instead of just waiting for somebody to get the ball rolling, I'm going to be the one to press into this. I'm going to be the one to say, hey, I'm going to make the commitment. I'm going to be the one that's going to press a little bit deeper. It's fun to talk about. I mean, you're up in Indianapolis, and I know the Cowboys and the Colts never play. You know, it's fun to talk about football, but then maybe talk about why is it I'm so angry about football? You know, there's something underneath that, you know, being intentional to do the hard work. So Rick, I'm grateful for this. So number one for pastors, what about guys who are part of a church, and most of the churches in America have 100 or less. They want to be part of something like this. They're not sure that they could pay for this. Are there options?
Yes, there are options. So with Covenant Connections specifically, is that we have scholarship funds. We've been matching up individuals and churches with pastors and church leaders that are wanting to get into a covenant group but are simply not able to do that. I challenge people to say, you know, it's kind of like a child sponsorship where someone in a church says, I believe in this ministry.
Oh, I like that.
And I want to help pastors thrive and not merely survive in ministry. So I'm willing to fund over a 3-year commitment, a pastor, or even a partial scholarship to fund a pastor to get into, a church leader to get into a covenant group. And then when those funds are there and we have someone who applies, who says, I'll give one example of it, as a church planter in North Carolina who said, I just can't, you know, we're a church plant. We don't have the funds to do this. And so I asked him, I said, if money was not an obstacle, would you get into a group? Do you need to get into a group? He said, I need this. I would get into a group in a heartbeat if it weren't for the money. And I said, okay, we'll find a scholarship. And we did. And so then I asked the pastor or church leader to send a picture and paragraph bio sketch that then I email to the person who is in the church that's funding the
Yeah.
scholarship. So then they can reach out and say, hey, we're so excited to partner with you. It's a partnership.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a sponsorship. So we're so grateful that we can sponsor you to be connected into a covenant group. And then the individual, the pastor or church leader, then emails back, and they begin to form a relationship. And then there's prayer support. Hey, I'm going on a retreat in 2 weeks. Would you be praying for me? And the person or the individual, the couple, is able to say, hey, how can I be praying for you, and so forth. So it's just so that is something that we're working tenaciously on. So let me just give a little plug for that for
Well,
any of.
yeah, please do that, Rick. And here's why. I know that most of our listeners are young men, but I know that we've got a few ladies as well, but we also have some older men who are in a position where they could financially do just that. Where would they want to go to be able to sponsor a pastor?
Well, you can do one of two things. You can, or both. Covenantconnections.life.
Okay.
Covenantconnections.life is our website. We're in the midst of revamping all of this and updating things, but you can go there and it has information on there, or you can just email me. Anyone can. I'm accessible. Rick at covenantconnections.life. Either way, both and. But I would say to individuals who may have a sense of calling to this or a passion to see. Here's the bottom line. Healthy pastors lead healthy churches.
Yeah.
And if pastors are not healthy and church leaders are not healthy, it's just a matter of time. We see it over and over and over again. We could give example after example when there's moral failure or burnout. And again, I mentioned 70% of all pastors quit the ministry. I'm not talking about moving from church to church. I mean, they say, forget it, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm done.
And
Yeah.
and burnout, it's like 42% of all pastors within the past year have experienced burnout. I just saw this, and I just happened to have this on my desk, that 1 out of 5 lead pastors report they contemplated self-harm or suicide in a 2024 study. So that's just 2 years old data, 2 years old, 1 out of 5 that they have contemplated. This is they've self-identified, contemplated self-harm or suicide. So here's the point. If pastors are not healthy, then eventually that has a cascading effect, and churches themselves not healthy. So if pastors burn out, they will drop out, which leads to church fallout, because then churches start to decline. Then it affects society. Churches, whether people some don't like this fact, but it is a fact that churches are a bedrock of the health of civilization, the health of society. And so if you take churches out, I mean, I can't remember. I just heard this or saw this recently that was from an atheist who said, I want there to be churches in my community. I don't believe a word of it, but it's good for society because it keeps crime down. It people in churches that they tend to have more interest in their community engagement and wanting to help serve and healthy families, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because we've not just for pastors, but to see it have a cascading effect, even to help with Indianapolis, with Houston, with wherever people live.
I believe you're spot on, Rick. And it reminds me of a couple of books. Rodney Stark is the guy's name. He wrote about the rise of Christianity, and in a big book, I really like this one. The title is "How the West Won," and he's just talking about the fact that when you look at history, the rise of so many things in the West opposed to Africa or China or Asia, in regard to the abolishment of slavery, the advancement of science, and the universities, and even, I mean, the reality that the International Red Cross was started by a Catholic priest and a Christian businessman. Most people don't realize that, but that's huge. Now, Rick, and I'm holding it up for the YouTube, the book by Alan, Soul Strength. You can get that on Amazon. But Rick, if somebody wanted to listen to one of your sermons, and I know that you've written a couple of books as well, where can they get your material, Rick?
Well, people can go to our website, e91church.com. So the letter E, the number 9, number 1, e91church.com. So that's where you can access information and get a hold of me. As far as with the church, and again, covenantconnections.life, with that ministry of soul care for pastors and church leaders. So it's just to throw this out to you, Steve. I want to make sure that the viewers and listeners of this podcast, this moment, understand the weight of this for their own personal lives, and that whether they reach out to us with Covenant Connections or some other entity, I just want you to see the weight of this in your own life, the need for this, so that you will recognize that we have to be open to reach out to others if we're going to move forward in healthy ways in our marriage, as dads, for those who are dads, when we're places of work, and how do we serve? How do we work effectively? How do we maintain joy in life? How do we deal with the burdens and the weight and the struggles that we face? That we need a band of brothers or a band of sisters for the ladies. And Covenant Connections is a ministry that comes alongside to serve you. It's not about us trying to get something.
Yeah.
We're here to serve you, and we're here to serve the local church.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can attest to that. I'm thinking about the relationships that I've seen formed as well. Rick, thank you very much. One final question. You had a young man in front of you right now. He is in his 20s. He's in his 20s, and you've got one shot, Rick. You can't preach him a sermon. You can't teach a devotion. You've got one shot. One shot. What are you going to tell this young man?
And I appreciate the question, Steve. And that's an easy question for me, not because it's just easy answers, but because I've got 2 sons that are in their 20s. And when I think of them and of their friends, then it's easy for me to picture them in my mind when I'm answering this. And what I would say to a 23, 24, 25-year-old man right now is that I want you to know that you are here on planet Earth for a reason. You are not here by accident. And part of the mission of your life is to recognize that Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, who died on the cross for you, to pay the price for your sins, to give you freedom from sin, who rose from the grave to conquer death and to give you that promise of eternal life, that he is with you and he is calling you not to go it alone. And for you to be the full man that God has called you to be and created you to be, you need other men in your life. So please reach out to other men. Don't try to fly solo. You need others in your life.
That's huge. Thank you, Rick.
After listening to your interview with Rick Grover, it was sad. A lot of the thing that I actually focused on a lot was hearing the statistics about pastors, and about even towards the end of the interview, he talked about the thoughts of suicide was 1 in 5 for pastors. So that brought up a lot of different thoughts and questions that I kind of had. So I think part of what I wanted to focus on was actually asking you some questions, and I think we can maybe extrapolate, and like you talked about before, we can extrapolate, most people aren't pastors, but we can extrapolate as men what y'all go through with it. There's obviously some intense, issues that can happen at being a pastor. And what can we take from that and teach or use those principles for the common man to, kind of get through and find that band of brothers. So I guess I wanted to start asking you a question. What is it?
That'll work. That'll work. I wasn't thinking about that, but that's actually probably pretty good.
Okay,
so,
good.
So let's do this.
So most he's talked about a lot of obviously there's a lot of pastors that kind of feel this burnout. What from a pastor's perspective really causes this burnout? Because burnout's a common thing, not just with pastors, but I want to just get, from your your perspective of life, like where does that burnout really come from in your pastoral ministry?
Well, there are a lot of components, and Matthias, part of it has to do with the culture that we live in today. You go back several generations, and being a pastor, a minister was considered to be a respectable vocation career in our culture today, and it's not that so much today. Also, you just look at the culture in general. There's a lot of biblical illiteracy today. There's a lot of spirituality today, but not grounded in biblical truth. So you have guys who are they have a sense that God's calling them into vocational ministry. Sometimes guys get into ministry for the wrong reasons, but they get into ministry with a sense of, okay, God's calling me to do something, and then they hit a brick wall, and then they hit a brick wall. And one of the problems with the culture is that so many people look at a pastor as he's the guy who's going to fix me. That's the professional, that's the guy who's supposed to do everything, and it can just be really draining. And Matthias, a lot of it has to do with guys who are in smaller churches
Mhm.
where there are more expectations and less help. Part of it's a misunderstanding about what ministry is. There's a passage in Ephesians where Paul talks about the fact that the job of the pastor, of the teacher, is to equip the saints
Yeah.
for the work of ministry. And a lot of times people think, well, he's the pastor, he's the minister, he's the guy who's supposed to do everything. So,
Yeah, I was actually gonna
the,
kind of expand on that if when
yeah,
you finish this
go
thought, I
ahead.
want to just well, I just want to say where I thought you were going to take that is because he lists off multiple different aspects of the body of Christ, multiple different kind
Mhm.
of vocations in the body of Christ, if you will. And what I think people have gotten misconstrued, at least in my years of growing up, I see that people go to church on Sunday and then that's their Christian life. And
Yeah.
they expect that the pastor's job is to evangelize, the pastor's job is to basically do everything. And they go to church on Sunday, then that's their Christian life. Is that right to an extent?
Yeah, I think so. And I just remembered this. Just as you were talking about that, it reminded me of the book that I wrote in 2017. And we've talked about doing an episode over the book sometime in the future, but there's a particular chapter in that called I Hate Being a Nice Pastor. And part of the reason why is because that word is overused. And so many people have so many different ideas about what that is. And
A nice pastor or
you're
just a pastor?
well, that it depends. A nice pastor. Uh, you're right about the particular passage because the text says, "And the Lord uh, gave apostles and prophets and evangelists." So there are all these different hats. So you have somebody in ministry, especially a smaller church, that is wearing all these different hats, and then you've got the pressures of the congregation, and then you have the pressures of the greater society. But then here's another thing too: you look at the makeup of a lot of pastors. I mentioned the difference between today and several generations ago. Well, part of the residual effect of the culture is actually in the lives of pastors. And let me put it this way: you have a number of guys who are going into vocational ministry that they feel called to do this, but they're just like so many other young men in our culture today who are coming from broken houses, broken homes. They're coming into ministry with all kinds of baggage in their own hearts and minds that men weren't dealing with 2 or 3 generations ago. They sense a calling of the Lord. They sense a purpose, a drive, but they've got a lot of brokenness in them. So they jump into the world. One of the things that Rick talked about is the common enemy. There is the reality of the common enemy, Satan, and they jump into the world, they jump into ministry, and they get the snot beat out of them, and they don't have a whole lot of uh, mental and emotional fortitude built up.
Mhm.
They don't have a lot of people who are supporting them, and it's really easy to crack. And the unfortunate thing is, a lot of people. This is probably why I called it. I hate being a nice pastor. A lot of people look at a pastor as he exists for me. He's going to preach the sermon. He's going to go to the funeral, do the funeral. He's going to do the hospital call. He's going to do all these sort of things. And it's really, he is there to support me spiritually. And a guy can only do that for so long, and until he snaps, until he breaks, until he says, I'm done with this. And that's why pastors need something like Covenant Connections. They need a venue, they need a tool, they need something where they can be with other guys who understand what it is,
Mhm.
not just academically, but they have they've been in the same trenches, kind of going back to that military idea. Uh, they're getting the same shells, the same bullets lobbed at them, and they understand. And that's what a band of brothers is. It's a shared experience.
Yeah.
You and I can sit around and we can talk with somebody who was in Afghanistan or uh, Vietnam, and we can talk about, hey, what was it like? Well, we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
We may hear the story, we may understand academically, but we don't know. We weren't there. So it's good to have this venue of Covenant Connections where guys can get with other guys who have been in the fight, and they've got ears that are empathetic in the right way, that can also challenge them. Um, Somebody who knows what they're talking about,
Yeah.
someone who's been in the fight.
Yeah, I hate to use this word because I think it's the context in which it's been used is horrible. But like a safe space to be a broken man, a safe space to be a broken
Well,
man with men who
yeah,
won't judge you but challenge you. I like that he said that they don't judge
yeah,
you but they
yeah.
challenge you. And they're not going to just pat you in the back. Oh, it's all okay. But they're also not going to condemn you. It's a place where you can just be a broken man and make those connections and find kind of that healing. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and one of the
And
well, the guy
camaraderie.
who started, yeah, the guy who started this ministry, Alan Ahlgrim, he quoted an old rabbi quite a bit, and one of the rabbi's statement was this: "How can you say you love me if you don't know what hurts me?" Okay, now that's a good statement. I like it, but that also requires the minister, the person, to be willing to say, "Hey, this is a pain in my life. This is a drain in life. That this is something that's really affecting me." Now, a pastor's not going to tell that to his congregation.
Right. He's not going to get up there
He
on
may,
stage and just be vulnerable and yeah.
yeah, yeah, and there's a time and place to do that too. There are different spheres. We want to be honest,
Right.
uh, but there's a time and place for us to share data. And those spheres get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the point being that there are saying things, and at the core of who we are, that we don't share with anybody. And Rick talked about guys falling out of ministry for various reasons. Sometimes guys just, they explode. They do something dumb. Well, if you're really wrestling deep in your heart with whatever this issue is, whatever this pain is, whatever this betrayal is, you're susceptible. You're susceptible to that pornography. You're susceptible to the drugs, the alcohol, the money, whatever. And I don't know anybody who went into ministry, or any guy who started any career, who said, "You know what? I think I'm going to do this for about 7 years, and I'm just going to blow my life apart."
Right, right. I don't
You
think
know,
anybody
the,
in the right mind would say or do that.
right, right. But a lot of guys get into ministry, and it just gets stinking tough. They're coming into ministry like guys have never come into ministry before, just like so many guys in our culture who do other things vocationally, with a lot of brokenness, dysfunction, with an absence of a father, um, the whole deal with the trauma, and they've got good intentions. They're called to do this, but they they've just been beat up,
Yeah.
and they need some other guys to be walking along with them. And I think, Matthias, that's probably the way I would capsulize it, that it is men walking with other men. In
Yeah.
other words, we're not in this to fix anybody, but we're just saying, "Hey, I'm going to walk with you. I'm
Mhm.
going to walk with you."
Yeah. So, okay, so for the viewer, so if I were to summarize kind of everything you just said based off the question I asked about, what causes that burnout, things like that. If I were to kind of transfer all this into a viewer who's not a pastor, if I let me see if I understand this right. So
Yeah,
you wear a lot of hats. You're expected. Not even that, just that you're living your life. You have to wear multiple hats like other men. Like other people do. You're expected to wear all these hats and kind of bear a burden on your own of all these things and kind of be that support system for all these people. Whereas a pastor who may not be in something like Covenant Connections doesn't have a support system,
right.
and so they start feeling this burnout of over like everybody's depending on them. It's just this expectation. Am I getting this right so far?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And then, they eventually burn out from this and then they're like, I'm out, and then so this causes so if I were to take this, extrapolate this information, you know, to somebody who's not a pastor, let's say, who is somebody like, me. I do wear a few hats. I'm expected in my sphere of life to wear a few hats. I'm expected to wear the provider hat, the dad hat, the husband hat, the friend hat, and whatever other hats, whatever I'm involved with at that
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
And yeah, you're right. When you don't have a support system, when you feel like you're like, I'm exhausted. I don't know, I've so many people rely on me, depend on me, expect so much of me. It's good to have that band of brothers, to have that where you can walk through life with these men and be open and vulnerable, share your brokenness, and find that healing. And I think that, let me go back to those people, because this is a big point that I wanted to make, is that those pastors who don't have those connections, like at Covenant Connection,
Mhm, mhm.
they, because they have so much baggage, because everybody has baggage to a certain extent. Some people have a lot, some people have little. There's all in between. And I think a big part of that is being able to unpack that baggage with a group of men you trust as a man, and kind of healing through that. Because, in James, it talks about not confessing your sins to one another so that you may be healed. And you
Mhm.
may not be in active sin or anything like that, but maybe sin in your life early on in life caused damage, caused baggage, or maybe other things caused damage, caused baggage in your life, and then not necessarily sin or anything on your part. But I think that same principle still applies, confessing these things to one another so that you may be healed. And so they don't have that. So without that constant kind of having their cup filled, they're just getting their cup shaken out for that
Yeah,
drop.
yeah.
Yeah. And so if I were to, like I said, if I were to take this to the everyday man, it's kind of that same principle. Having that band of brothers will kind of get you through, and you'll find that healing. You'll get through those tough times because you have a band of brothers to rely on, depend on, do life with. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, and it's not so much. Yeah, the baggage quotient is there, but it's not just the fact that I'm broken. It's I'm dealing with broken people,
Right. And well,
and
yeah, but you're also not
the
dealing with your brokenness is kind of what I was getting at, because
yeah, yeah.
some men don't even know how to deal with that brokenness. Cause I think Rick Rover talked about that a little bit, is, men don't, he's like he said, he didn't even know how to express what he was feeling. So it's
Mhm,
like, well,
mhm.
men, if they don't know how to express, they can't even get it out.
Yeah,
So that's,
yeah.
that's kind of what I was
And
trying to get at there.
yeah, and I think and yeah, I kind of chuckled when you said that safe place. The word safe place is, oh,
Yeah.
come on, please,
Yeah.
please, 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 please. But in a sense, it's good because there are times where, and I'll just share in my life, there have been times it's like, you know what? If I did not have Jesus in my heart right now, I just want to punch this guy in the face.
Hmm.
Um, but you can't do that. But if you just bury that angerness, that anger, I mean, it doesn't go away. It
Yeah.
doesn't go nowhere. It festers. It gets bigger, and one of two things are going to happen. It's going to internalize to a point where you're in clinical depression,
Mhm.
or it's going to explode, and you really are going to do something dumb someday.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories of that as well. So it's an opportunity where you can get with another pastor, or again, just any guy. I can get with some guys that I trust. They're not going to take me too serious. I mean, they're going to take the issue seriously, but they're going to know what I'm doing here. When I'm looking someone in the eye and I'm saying, man, I just really want to box you in the nose. They understand it's not personal. They understand, Steve's just working something out here. We all need something like that. And I think about King David in the book of First and Second Samuel in the Old Testament. He had guys around them. I think about the Psalms that he wrote. Some of those songs, imprecatory songs, where he was just honest about his emotions.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about the man identity. Who are we? We are created in the image of God. We are not robots. Now, there are times we need to overcome the emotions and we need to push through, but the emotions are there, and we need a healthy place. Here we go.
A
We need a
safe
safe
place,
place.
a
Yeah,
safe
there we go.
space.
Yeah, where we can work this out, but it's got to be worked out. And there are so many young men. I've seen them. They've got friends they play games with. They've got people that they talk with on the internet. But to be able to sit down with another man and to be able to say, "Man, this just sucks,"
Hmm.
and not be worried about, okay, what are they going to do? What are they going to think about me?
Right.
They need to have a situation where they can just be honest.
Yeah. We were created for not just connection, but deep connection with others.
Mhm.
And as men, we need that deep connection with other men. And I'm not going to talk too much about my experience with Mark Men, but it's like, it was an amazing weekend. I'm not going to talk too much about Mark Men because we're talking about covenant connections here. but I can only speak from my experience.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I would say I experienced a deep connection with men that I've never experienced in my life. And if it were up to me to choose that, I wouldn't have done it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
wouldn't just choose to be this vulnerable. I wouldn't choose to just do this or that. But being in that group or finding that organization that brings you in through this kind of guidance, like Covenant Connections will, it's it forces you to be uncomfortable in a way that you would never choose to do on your own, but you find it so much you find a lot of healing, you find a lot of that deep connection with other men that you didn't really know you needed until you feel it. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Find a good organization, find a good group of men that's going to keep you accountable like you and Rick talked about. You know, it's not just if you don't show up to something, people are going to say, "Okay, what's going on? Are you
Yeah.
okay?" You know, you got to get your butt here next time. Something but not just that shallow, but it's an accountability thing, but also they genuinely care. They genuinely know a part of you that a lot of people wouldn't know and don't talk to you about, and that you don't talk about with others or share with others. You mean that
Yeah.
you made,
And
yeah,
yeah, and I mean, Will, with the President Covenant group that I'm facilitating right now, yesterday, man, I was sicker than a dog. Well, a couple days ago, I was sicker than a dog, and I was trying to work, and I was just falling apart all over the place, and I was just experiencing all kind of temptations, and I was just it was just bad. And I just picked up my phone and I texted these guys, and then I texted some of my buds, Mark Men in Christ, and I just said, "Hey man, I just need some prayer right now." And within 2 or 3 minutes, I had 4 or 5 guys
yeah,
text me back, and I knew, okay, these guys are praying for me. And Matthias, that is amazing.
hmm,
Um, again, I think about the guys who have been in trenches. I've never been in the military, so I can't say I know that I know, but I can see it that these guys they've got each other's back, and we need that.
hmm,
So the big challenge is, how do I pursue that? And Rick talked about his father-in-law. Rick talked about some other men, and sometimes part of it's so stinking easy, but there is the edge or the angle of, even though it's easy, I got to be committed.
yeah,
Sometimes if things are easy, people aren't that committed. But uh, hey, we're going to take Thursday afternoon. We're going to take Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock. We're going to meet at Black Rifle Coffee. We're going to do it, and we're not going to talk about the Cowboys. We're not going to talk about the Astros. We're not going to talk about whatever for this period of time. We're going to be on mission, and we're going to say, you know what, guys, this is something in my life that is just draining the snot out of me. We're going to let them know about that. We're going to say, okay, guys, but I'm trying to have an optimistic attitude, like Alan Ahlgrim there. So here's some things that I'm really taking delight in. Now, see, that challenges us as well, to
mhm.
force us to look for the positives. So I'm delighting at this, but I want to grow. So, okay, guys, here's something that I discovered. It
Yeah.
could
I
be,
like those 4Ds.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be anything, just something new that I have observed, and I can share it with the other guys. It could be with my job. Here I am. I'm working at this hospital, and I discovered this procedure works better. Here I am. I just discovered this about myself, and I'm sharing this, and we're gleaning from each other. But then a determination that, in other words, that there's some action plan here. And maybe, Matthias, maybe this is part of the difference here, that I'm not just sitting around and saying, woe is me, life stinks, everybody hates me, I'm going to go eat some worms. It's not that. Now there's a place to be honest, but it's saying, okay, man, this stinks, but I'm going to look at what God has done. I'm going to share what I'm learning, and I'm going to determine to press into that. And I'm asking you guys to challenge me to keep pressing into that. All that to say is, part of it, Matthias, is not that difficult. I find some guys, and I think we need to be thoughtful about who we want to do this with. And in other words, there's some guys you just can't trust.
Yeah.
Um, and you can probably figure that out, but you want to be, here we go, safe. We want to be in a safe place, where I know that I have the freedom to talk about what drains me, and no one in this group is going to tell anybody else in the office about it.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
one in this group is going to tell anyone else in the school, and the factory and the dealership are, it's here.
Mhm.
They've got my back. I'm opening up to say this is something that's really frustrating me. Well, it's not going to do anybody any good if they carry that to someone else. So I want to find guys that I can trust. I want to find guys that are not arrogant. Um, I don't want to try to do my work and one of the guys says, "Oh, I know how you feel, and this is what I would do." And it's like, dude, I didn't ask you how you feel.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you what you would do. This is what's going on in my. This is my work right now.
Yeah.
So someone who has some mental, emotional intelligence to be able to receive,
Yeah.
just receive, not fix, just
Mhm.
receive, because sometimes. Well, I mean, you probably know this, Matthias. Sometimes we just need to do um, hey, guys, I need 30 seconds. What do you need 30 seconds for? Well, because I'm mad. I just need to rant for 30 seconds.
Yeah. And you can
Hit it.
just,
Hit it.
a good thing to say
Yeah.
is, a good thing to say before that is like, I don't need advice. I don't want, this or that. I just need to rant. And then, I'll figure out what I need from there. You don't have
Yeah.
to, you can just tell them, I don't need advice right now. Just let me rant,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I like that, I've done that with you before. I'll come to you and, I've told you some life stuff and you're like, what do you need, Matthias? Do you need advice or do you want me to just listen? And I'm like, I don't know, Steve. But I appreciate that you asked that because a lot of people don't ask that and they just start trying to tell you what to do. And you're like, this is making me more mad. I just wanted to
Yeah.
yell
Yeah.
about this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like that you made that distinction.
Yeah. Being selective,
Yeah.
um, we want to be honest. Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no no." But there are levels of honest intimacy.
Mhm.
Um, there are things I only share with my wife because she's my wife. There are things I only share with the guys in my covenant group because that's it.
Right.
There are things I'll share with you, things I'm going to share with the elders of our church. There are things that I'm not going to talk to my neighbors about.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there's just a level of emotional intelligence that
yeah,
you have to understand who you can and cannot talk to. And that might come with experience, but you have to understand who you can and cannot talk to about with certain things. That just comes with your position, or I'm sure as a pastor, maybe that's another thing. Is as a pastor, it's actually you don't feel like you can open up to a lot of.
right.
Sorry, this is a thought from earlier. My earlier questions. You don't really feel like you can be. You have to wear kind of your pastor mask, your pastor hat, in front of a lot of people because
Mhm, mhm.
I'm sure that there's lots of you come into contact. In my job, I've come into contact with a lot of people, and there's somebody I share life with. We talk, we joke the whole time while they're working out, and then some I don't tell much about my life. And I think you
Mhm.
just kind of feel that out about certain people. But as a pastor, I'd imagine you meet a lot of people, and you're probably been burned by some people, and so you kind of have to really be guarded. And I'm sure that's also pretty taxing.
Well, and see, part of it too is going back to pastors. There are times that you do need to be tough because they are broken.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, man, their wife just died. Man, their kid just got hauled off to jail. Man, they just lost their job. They need someone rock solid to be with them.
yeah,
Right now. The problem is when you are constantly being rock solid for others and there's no one that's there for you, it just whittles away at you.
yeah,
So so part of the big challenge for guys, again, I believe in you, young men. I believe you can do this. I believe that God's created you for a purpose. What I just want to say is, and I really, Matthias, I like the way Rick ended the interview. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing. Guys, you need a band of brothers. You need some other guys who are in your court. So, find somebody who understands your vocation or at least has a general idea of what you're doing. Someone that lives somewhat in your sphere of influence that kind of gets you, someone that you can trust, um, someone that you likewise can invest in. The ideal thing is, man, I just wish every guy had this. That you would have guys in your corner. Thinking of boxing. You got guys in your corner that when the bell rings, you want somebody for the round being over with. You want somebody there for you, and those times when everything falls apart, you need to be able to get on the phone and talk to somebody. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. And I think if you pray about it, I think if you look in your your church, look around. You know what? If it's somebody, they may not even be a Christian to start with, but you can trust this guy and live with an authentic faith around him. And if you've really invested in a relationship with him, there's a good chance he'll be there for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, finding that mutual, yeah, finding if somebody's not going to just be, it's not going to be one sided thing, but somebody you can invest in as well. I've got probably three good friends, three really good friends that I would say, you know, that if something happened at 2 a.m., I give them a call, they're going to be there. And it's tough because all
Yeah.
my best friends actually live pretty far away from me now. So yeah, I do feel that
Hmm. Hmm.
going back to the practicality of it, it's like when you even if they're still good friends, they're band of brothers, not having them physically present eye to eye, having that moment and that time together is a tough thing. And you can start to feel isolated, after not very long. Especially if you're going through a lot in life, got a lot of stuff going on, you're married, you got kids, you start to feel that exhaustion and that fatigue. You feel that burnout, so it's
Yeah.
like it's tough to, so it's like there is something different about having them with you in person, eye to eye, just talking with, venting with, things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
And
really
and
important.
that's why with covenant connections there's the ongoing communication. There's the ongoing communication. There's the working through books together, especially starting out with Alan's book about soul care. There is the monthly Zoom call, but twice a year the groups get together. It's normally like a Monday through a Thursday. And you know what, Matthias, guys actually look forward to this. It's like, I'm pushing through, I'm doing my job, I'm doing my duty. uh, but man, what do I know? Well, in 6 weeks, I get to be with these guys, and that puts a little bit more step in their walk. It gives them something to look forward to. But it's this idea, it's this principle that I am going to get together with these other guys, and that is so needed in our culture today,
Yeah.
where we are fragmented. We are, um, yeah, we can do Zoom, but you know what? It's just not the same. It's just
Right.
not the same. Being in an environment where we can have some steaks together, we can go out and fish, we can go, whatever it is, but we can set the world aside a little bit. And you know what? If you look at the Gospels, there are two or three times, well, more than that, but we read of two or three times where Jesus said to the disciples, "Hey guys, we need to get away. Let's get into the boat. Let's go to the other side of the lake. We need to get away so that we can build each other up,
Mhm.
so that we can jump back into ministry again." So it's something that ministers need. It's something that churches need. It's something that will bless the world, and it's something that every man needs. That I need some guys that I could get together with and do life with and to walk with. And I think maybe the summary point is, dude, if pastors need this, man, we all need this. We all
Yeah,
need this.
absolutely. Do you have so earlier you said one big challenge. Can you lay out the challenge succinctly?
Well, I think that's the big one. We're talking about getting into a band of brothers. So obviously that's the big one. Um, if you don't know how to do it, go talk. Go talk to a pastor. Go talk to some older men at your church. But I want to challenge everybody to do this. I mentioned David, and we talk a lot about the Bible here at the Man Identity. But I would ask everybody to go to the Old Testament, pick up at 1 Samuel 17. Now, David's mentioned in the preceding chapter, but in 17, that's where David uh, takes Goliath on and puts him down. But follow King David. He's not king at the time, but follow him from 1 Samuel on into 2 Samuel, and then we see a little bit in First Chronicles, or maybe it's Second Chronicles as well. The whole point being, you look at David's life. He was a man after God's own heart. He was a man of many emotions. He wrote music, wrote the Psalms, played the harp, but he was a tough boy. He took down Goliath. He fought the enemy, but we see this that he's got a band of brothers with him. First, it's Jonathan. Um, the scriptures refer to it as David's mighty men, but the whole point being is he's not alone. He's not alone, and that's what we don't want. What we do want, we want guys to be in a band of brothers. Now, if you know a pastor, I would just encourage you to think about what you can do to encourage him. Not showing up and saying, "Hey, can you do this for me?" But praying for that guy. And a lot of times we come to someone with an agenda. Hey, I'm going to help you, and here's how I'm going to help you. Maybe going to a pastor and saying, "I'm here, whatever you need," and being willing to do it, even if it's not your first calling, but also encourage him to look into covenant connections. Encourage him finding other pastors
Mhm.
that he can do life with. And it's got to be real life,
Yeah.
because pastors can be competitive as well, which is part of the problem. We live in a broken world, and pastors can be competitive as well. Who's preaching at the biggest church, who has the biggest book, and that's draining as well. And so they need an environment where they can just be honest. They're not playing games. They're not competing. They're just walking and doing life. Pastors need it, and guys need it, and we need other guys to tell us what you and I always say, Matthias: be strong.
Be strong. Make sure to like, subscribe. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice. Make sure to
Hit
follow
it
us on
twice.
Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this, because it's pretty much on every platform. I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Man Identity. We'll see you next week.